Alrighty, hello everyone. It's time for another live stream, and this one's specifically for all of you people that did not go to Reefapalooza and wished you had, so I'm going to give you something entertaining instead. Reefapalooza is taking place in New York this weekend. There's a lot of live streams coming over the web. You'll find them on Facebook. So if you're checking like the Neptune system, Scott from Rhode Island does a live stream constantly. You'll see stuff on Instagram. I mean, if you need to know the latest, that's the place to go. And believe it or not, they're actually giving away a Trident at this Machina, and the donations for a raffle ticket. But then you have to buy, you know, as many tickets as you want, and the money goes to Coral Restoration Foundation, which is pretty awesome. That's one of the groups that we worked with in the past. So how exciting is that? Hi everybody. It's great to see all of you on here. Somebody let me know the sound is working. No one said it isn't working, so that's a good sign. And this camera angle does not help with my stupid overweight gut that I have got to reduce. I have let myself go, and I need to start working at the gym because nothing else is working. So what's in front of me right now is the new top-off container for my reef, because my old one was made in 2010, and I made it exactly what would fit in the stand. I used every single inch, and so it's actually too tight. And so what I wanted was a brand new one that would allow me to be able to reach into it and change out a pump or remove it to clean it occasionally, which I've never needed to do, but I didn't even have the option. The only way to get that container out, and I'm talking about that one down there that you can see behind me, the only way to get that container out right now is to remove the plumbing and the sump and then slide it over and get it out. So since I'm replacing my sump next week, it's the perfect time to replace the top-off container as well. So I just glued it, and I need to let this cure for a few more minutes before I mess with it. But I wanted to just tell you what that thing is. And then over here behind me is the new sump. So I've got a different camera angle here that I can flip us to. So this is the new sump. And what you're looking at is a refugium in the front, skimmer section here, return zone there. And I know there's always confusion, well, how did you make that work and what did you accomplish here? So what I want to explain in here is that there's a hole. I'm going to come around. There's a hole right here. This is where the water is going in. And what I'm basically doing, I don't have all the plumbing parts. I'm waiting for them to arrive this week. But I'm going to have a elbow right here. And then I'm going to have this valve right here. And then this line is going to go straight up to the overflow box on the outside of my reef tank. And that is going to send water into the refugium zone. Now the refugium zone is about this tall. And so it's going to have this much water in there all the time. But water is going to come in down low because with this Herbie system, it's only water and no bubbles. And it's actually amazing. And a friend of mine convinced me to do it a couple of months ago. I love it. So now with a new sump, of course, I'm incorporating it even better than before. This sump is made of 3/8 cast acrylic. It's 58 inches long, it's 31¼ inches wide, and it's 16¾ inches tall. Everything was made or cut out on the CNC machine, and then I spent meticulous time gluing it all together to make sure all my seams are super clean, and actually I'm very pleased with how this came out. And I also wanted to explain, so I said water's going into the refugium, so water will flow across here, and then it'll exit either these teeth or these teeth. It can go out the entire corner into this section over here, which is my entire return zone. And the reason I made the sump this way this time is because I wanted to have the front area where I could look at it from the front when I'm in the living room and see if the water line is where it belongs. And if it drops down, I know that my system didn't top off, and I can tell. Because with my old sump, my refugium went all the way across, and I couldn't even see the return zone. And I wouldn't even know there was a problem until I walked behind and actually noticed it. So, and that happened about a month ago where just a sensor was dirty, it didn't add any more water, and it got very close to sucking air into the pumps, and my calcium reactor was offline. So I was like, nope, never again, I'm going to change that. So I decided to go with this direction here where I can actually see the front. And then on top here, you'll see a close-up in a moment here, are some cooling fans that are going to blow straight down on top of the water. And then over here is a modular system for running a filter sock, as well as the ClariSea, because these are a couple of new things that, well, this is new. This is not. This is just me building something. But the ClariSea, I was trying to figure out a way to build it in. And the bottom line is that when I'm looking at how to put stuff in a sump, there's a basic rule I can live with. You know, I don't mind certain things being a certain way forever. But when I come across something like, well, what if I don't want to run a sock at all? What if I want to run the ClariSea? What if I don't like the ClariSea and I want to remove it? And now I've built this thing into my sump to where it's permanently in there. It would basically be a static object that does me no good. So I wanted to do something different. And so what I did was I made this module. So this guy right here actually pulls right out. And I can physically remove it from the system when I don't want to run that filter sock at all. And then the ClariSea can sit right here in this spot and do its job. And I can use one of the drains here to feed into the ClariSea, or maybe both. It's just a matter of how I want to plumb it. But these right here, these two drains here are emergency drains. So this is my main refugium drain. So water goes into the refugium from the reef tank in here. And then water goes in here from the reef. So you've got refugium water here, 25% of the water goes there, 75% of the water drains into here, which goes straight into the skimmer section and just flows right into that zone. And then these are my emergency drains. So the idea was, I'm never going to use these drains, but if I need to use them, I will be using them specifically to run them either into a filter sock or into the ClariSea. Let me change the angle here a little bit. It's a very tight spot. So, how does that look? A little bit lower. So just like the refugium has a gate valve on there to connect to control how much water goes in, this one also will have a valve to dial in the exact amount of water I want to go into the sump and just have pure water with no air bubbles. This is a really neat system. And I'm kind of overwhelmed with it because when I first was, I read about it, I was like, okay, whatever. I'm happy with my Dursos. But since switching to the Herbie system, my tank is silent, which is amazing to me. And every day I'm amazed because I'm so used to hearing the little bits of noise that sound like a babbling brook, and now that's all gone. And I'm hearing other things in the house instead of my aquarium. So this guy will be probably around here where I can just reach it easily from right here. And the steel stand, of course, is going to be coming right around here that the aquarium is sitting on. So these are going to come right out the end and go straight up into the overflow box. All right. So you've seen the ClariSea. Obviously, I'm going to have to do some information about that later when it's completed and installed and running. But I made myself a really beefy stand. This is out of 3/8 acrylic because I wanted something super stable. So when I set the ClariSea on there, I don't have to worry about it toppling off. I just didn't want to take any chances since I wasn't using their hook method to connect it to my sump. So let's talk about the module. Kind of proud of this thing. I came up with it last night. I called a couple of friends. I asked a few people what they thought, and basically this is my solution. So what I've got here is a box with a round hole right here that will, I'm sorry, can you see that? There's a hole right here. That is going to fit around these two bulkheads perfectly. So I just slide it into place, and that's it. Now water will just flow through here and into this section. It has nowhere else to go unless this were to pull away. But what's going to pull it away? Nothing. It's going to sit there statically, and it's just going to do its job. And remember, it's just for the emergency drains. It's not for forever. So if I wanted to, for example, run Phosphate RX, and let me change this camera angle. All right, so if I want to run, I'm still not in the shot. I'll get down here. If I want to run Phosphate RX, and I was trying to use a 10 micron sock, which I actually have right here. 10 micron is a lot different from a 200 micron, which is this one. So this one's just a standard sock. Everyone gets these socks. They like to use them. I hate using socks, but occasionally you have to. That's why I made this gizmo for myself. This is a 10 micron sock that I got just for using Phosphate RX, and it traps all the particulates. It's very fast. It clogs up in mere hours. This is not a filter sock you'll use for days. This is the sock you'll use overnight. And what I did was I created this box to where the sock fits in there exactly, so that water will just flow straight over and in instead of having to go up over the sock and hopefully get in or pass by the sock. So water will just go through here. And I know it's a little low, but that's just what it is on this tank. There's on the sump. The only way to make the sock taller, to make it look more logical, is if the whole sump was taller, and I don't want that. I like this, and this is fine. This will get me by. So then this is sitting in its corner, and I made a lid to sit on top, which will keep any spatter out of there. So how does this work? How does the water get in here? If I close this valve entirely and slow this one down significantly, just for the night that I'm running Phosphate RX, I can then have all the water dumping into here and be processed by the filter sock. So that'll be really nice. And there's still, of course, room for my protein skimmer to sit right here next to it. Now, there's a piece of acrylic right here, and there's something that's going to sit right there. So since mine is installed, I'm just going to put this box up there for you to imagine. There's a Trident right there on the edge of my sump. The Trident is 12 inches long and 4.5 inches wide, and that is exactly the width I made right here. So mine will sit there, and you'll just measure the water automatically and make me super happy. Then, let's see, how am I going to get you guys over there? I'm going to have to move you again. Let's see if I run out of wire here. Gonna make you seasick. I apologize. Should have warned you. I'm gonna make you seasick. All right, so here is the cooling fan system. And in the past, I had one fan blowing down to my return zone. So I decided this time that what I wanted to do was I wanted to put 3 fans, because if you have one and it works, 3 would be better, right? And I want to put them here on top, but I didn't want to actually make a frame or some kind of a bracket or some kind of a clamp. So what I did was I actually created the top of the sump with one piece, hollowed it out for the fans, and recessed it almost an eighth of an inch deep. So these fans can just drop into place in their little spots. There'll be 3. I've got more of them on order. And then they'll be controlled by the apex. And when the tank gets a little too warm, these will all turn on and start blowing straight down on the water and help cool the tank, which is how I've always done it. I either use fans or nothing at all. I'm not a chiller guy, so I've really found this to work, and now I've got the choice of, now I've got it built in where I can do all 3, and I'm very happy with that. And then I continue to make the shelf wide over here, because this is my Kamoer pump that I use to dose my calcium reactor. So water is flowing from the sump into it, and then it is spinning away and moving water into the calcium reactor, which then trickles out into the reef. So I want to make a spot permanently, because if you remember in previous videos, this thing was sitting on a little tiny piece of acrylic that was balanced on the top with a couple of pegs, and it was kind of iffy. And I thought, let me just give it a permanent spot. So my plan, I have to move you guys one more time. Close your eyes. I got this one cord wrapped around. It's causing problems here with the leg. Ugh. All right. So what I want to do here is I'm thinking I'll drill a small hole right here, and I will put like a permanent piece of acrylic tubing inside. I'll just like wedge it in, glue it in, so it's just like a straw. And then the tubing that comes off this pump, which uses very fine tubing, I'll just snake it down inside the straw, and it'll draw water from the sump, and always get water from the sump, and no issues, and no worried about where the tubing is. I can just draw it up out through the straw. So that's my plan for that. So I'll have one that goes down, and then the other one will come out and go to the calcium reactor. And then this right here, this bulkhead that you can almost see right here, that is for the that is for the manifold. So this goes to a Vectra L1, and so water gets sucked out, it goes to the Vectra. The Vectra feeds right now my anemone cube, and it's feeding the reactor for carbon, but it's not doing anything else anymore. I used to do biopellets, I used to do calcium reactor, I used to do all kinds of stuff, and now it's not. So I don't know, but I'll just change it up a little bit, and that will be here. My main return pump will be the Abyss pump that will be sitting in here, because I've already run it internally for 1.5 years, and I have no reason to suddenly say let's put it external. It's done its job. So I'm just going to set it right there. So I have a calcium reactor right here, I'll have a carbon reactor here, or it can go way over there in that empty spot. And then right here will just be my my return pump. I'll have a magnetic holder here for my top off from the ATK that the Apex uses to top off my system. And I'm going to build some kind of an assembly right here for my 3 heaters. So they'll sit there and be kind of in place, so as the water flows over the baffle and pours over the heaters, it heats the water evenly. So that's kind of the tour of the sump. Back this up a little bit. And I couldn't see any of your comments because I was busy doing a tour and I'm way far away from my computer screen. So let's see. One of the things that I'm considering doing with the new refugium is to, instead of using sand like I've always done, I'm toying with the thought of using this media. So this is calcium reactor media, and somebody recommended it to me, and then I think another person reinforced the idea. They just said use this big bony stuff for the substrate in your refugium, and that way you have a place for the worms and the bugs to dwell, and you can have all your macroalgae above it, and it's easy to clean because it's so clunky. And you don't have to worry about anything moving around. And I'm like, well, I've never really had a problem with movement. I kind of like the idea, and I've got multiple bags of this, so I might just do that. And I don't know, maybe it'll take 2 bags to do that refugium. I do want to tell you guys all about the dimensions, what each zone does and all that kind of stuff. Let me take this top-off container off the table. I was almost thinking about gluing this top-off container on the live stream with you guys today, but that seems very boring and tedious, and I don't know. So I think I won't. So let's see. What if we switch back to this camera for a second? There you go. So here is the new top-off container size. This one is 30 inches tall. The last one was 33 inches tall, so it came down 3 inches. The box is 22 long, and I think it's about 16 7/8 wide. I just went with what was left on the sheet of acrylic, so I didn't waste any. So since I shrunk it down a little bit, I made it a little bit wider to get a little bit more water in there. This is the top piece. That will go right on top. And it's just going to sit like this. And then there's another piece, of course, that goes on the bottom. That will be underneath this whole thing. The last top-off container held somewhere around 45 gallons of water. So I'm going to assume this one's going to hold pretty much the same amount of water. And the reason that I did an offset and didn't put this thing in the very middle, like right here, is because when it's sitting under the aquarium, this is actually the front panel that faces the living room. And then right here is the square tubing of the stand that the walkboard slides into. So I wanted to have the tubing here and have access port here. So when I'm reaching into this thing, I can get in there and I can switch out a pump or whatever I need to do, or clean it, or like I said, remove it. But this is the new one. And it's all made of 3/8, so it's going to be very heavy duty, and it should last 10 years like the last one. All right, let me take all this off the table now. Yes, it's as heavy as it looks. All right. This sump right here mathematically measures out to about 133 gallons to the rim if I were to fill it up. It took 2 of us to take it outside so I could route the edges. And because it's so big, I had to get a larger board for my table to handle the additional width of this project. The refugium itself is 48 inches long, 8 inches wide, and this wall is 14 tall, but the water line is 12 inches tall. and that came out to 20 gallons of water. The skimmer zone is, well, somewhere on here I have a tape measure. I made the skimmer zone, a total, the entire thing with everything, including the modular stuff, is 27 inches by 22 inches. And on my last sump, this was pretty much the same distance without this. I had a bubble tower crammed in there, and I had all my drains coming down inside the top, and it's kind of messy. So I'm really excited to have new plumbing just come straight down and slide right in the end. It's going to look so clean, so sleek. It's going to be great. And then, like I said, if I don't want to use this at all, and I remove it, so it's not even in the sump, then when this drain and this drain are operating, if there's any problem, a little extra water could, go down the emergency drain, and it would just run down the wall. I wouldn't hear it, but I'd be aware of it. And so it's not like a thing where you have to think where you're going to have to deal with a big mess. I just wanted to have something that was clean, made sense. The water line in my skimmer section is 9 inches tall, and these guys, the center point of these bulkheads is at 12 inches, so it's about a 3-inch drop. So in theory, very little will come out of those holes ever, except when I divert water and stop water going here to force it here for whatever I'm going to do, such as running the sock or running the ClariSea, just to see how it operates, see if I like it. But I guess I have commitment issues. I just don't want to commit to one thing for the rest of my life because I might not like it later, and I hate when something's in the way, because you can't just cut it off easily and go on with your life. It's welded into the sump. And if you've ever had an acrylic sump and you want to change something, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Alrighty. I believe I did the math yesterday, and I think operating water volume in the sump will be somewhere around, I think it was 67 to 75 gallons of water. So there's plenty of room to hold excess if there's a power outage for the 400 gallon as well as the anemone cube to drain. But that's never been a factor. Usually the water goes up about this high in my sump when the power's off, all the way across. And then, when the power resumes, it just drops back down to normal and all is good. I think that's everything I wanted to tell you about this. All right, so let's see. Could you run 2 ClariSeas if you built a different stand? Well, yeah. You can put as many as you want. It just comes down to how much space you have in your sump. That is the largest ClariSea on the market. It's the 500, the model 500. And I kind of like the idea of having it tucked in right here and having my drain go into this pipe and then force the water in. And also, the reason I made it this tall is specifically because I've understood from talking with others that this operates best in about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of water rather than being fully submerged in there. Because the way the system works, the device works, water will go in to the middle section between all this fleece, and then it trickles out the base, or it runs out the base. And as this gets more and more clogged up with detritus, the water line rises higher and higher inside the box until it hits a float switch. And when the switch activates, it forwards this fabric 8 inches, 12 inches, 16 inches, whatever it takes to move some fabric out of the way. Could be less. Just to move some fabric out of the way to have nice new fabric and roll up some of the brown, the dirty fabric on this side. So this is the new roll, this is the dirty roll. And so it will just slowly advance itself and keep processing. And the idea is that you can run a fleece roll for about 2 months. I've heard the first month you set it up, there's so much garbage in your tank that it uses up the roll instantly. And then after the first month, then you put it on, and it seems to last about 2 months. So I wanted to make sure that I had only I wanted to make sure I only had it submerged a certain amount of depth in the water. So my water line is at 9 inches, and that puts the bottom half of this about 2.5 inches in the water. And the rest of it can be above, but yet be within the sump. And if anything weird happened, it had to overflow, it can overflow inside the sump, and it doesn't make a mess. So that was really important to me. Oh, Dan, that's great news about your brain coral improving. Thank you for letting us know. Can you explain the flow and how important it is for sections having different flow rates. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move this ClariSea out of the way. I just feel like I'm going to knock it over and break it. Only because I'm swinging my arms around and it's not in place under the tank where it's safe and surrounded by gear. One of the things, I'm going to change gears just for a sec. I'm planning a new light here. I've been running the same LED light on my refugium for, well, since 2010. And it's just a huge black box with a ginormous aluminum heatsink, and it's just old. It's 9 years old. Everyone says LEDs are good for 5. I think I've probably got my money's worth out of it. So I want to replace it. And I think I'm going to get something from Reef Bright that will fit down in here and just shine light in here. And it'll be they have a plant grow light that is somewhere around 5100 Kelvin, 6500 Kelvin. I think it's 2 different LED diodes. And I'm just going to probably put 2 strips or some kind of XHO or something here. And I think I'll have them custom make it, because this is 48 inches, but you've got a little rim here, and it's a little shorter. So I'm thinking about maybe making it 44 inches to hit the spot. Okay, so I always have had the same rule with sumps. I've been telling this to people forever. It's in the article on my website as well, that I always recommend 25% of your water draining from the tank goes into the refugium, and the rest, the 75%, go into the skimmer section. Let the skimmer get the bulk of the water and really clean it. But the refugium should get some raw water, because you're trying to grow plants and you're trying to grow pods. And so by having some tank water go in there, you're feeding that section. If you were to just pump water in from your sump after it's been filtered, that water would be pretty clean, and you might end up having to feed the refugium just to help it survive, because it's not getting enough nutrients, because your system is so efficient. Especially in tanks where you already have super low nitrate and super low phosphate, you may discover that you're having to add extra things to the water to actually make it a little dirtier. And so refugiums can't do well with no nutrients. The plants can't survive. And we need the plants, because the plants produce oxygen in the water, and they absorb those nutrients I was talking about, which also helps keep the nuisance algae out of your display tank. So if you have 25% of your water going here, let's just take a real number, like 2,000 gallons an hour is draining from my tank. So 500 gallons an hour will go in here, and 1,500 gallons an hour will go through here, down through this baffle, up through this baffle, and into this return zone, and then a return pump will just send it back up to the tank. And I have a manifold as well, like I said, that will feed a couple other things. But that is how I've recommended it forever. And the benefit is, number one, with this split system with 2 drains handling 2 different sections of the sump at the same time, you can have different water heights. So this one here is at 12 inches, this one's down here at 9. If we were trying to do all of the flow into here, for example, let's say we put 2,000 gallons an hour in here, and it all flows in here, then it would have to drain into here, skimmer section, and then it had to flow over here to return zone. That's the only way to do it. But then what happens is you're shooting water through here so quickly. I've discovered in my experience that when there's too much flow in a refugium, the plants don't do well. They just don't like getting hammered with water flow. And so I find that slower flow through there works out really well. I also think that if the surface isn't crazy rippling, that light penetrates better than when it's all choppy like crazy. But since using LEDs, you're probably blasting it anyway. That probably doesn't matter these days. But back then, we were using compact fluorescent bulbs and T5 bulbs and stuff like that. The reason I choose 9 inches for a skimmer zone is that works with most skimmers. A lot of skimmers are rated to sit in 8 to 10 inches of water. Now, even though this is the right height for my skimmer, I am going to make a 2-inch skimmer stand to lift my skimmer up a little bit off the bottom, because the collection cup is right here, and underneath the collection cup is a little nipple with a hose that feeds over to my waste collector, and it's just a little too low to where the water hooks under the rim and then comes over the rim, and it doesn't quite push all the liquid out. It kind of like stays in the tube all the time. So if I can raise the skimmer up a little bit higher so that just drains gravity perfectly into the waste collector, that will be better for me and for the whole operation of the skimmer. So that's why I'm going to just raise it up. It won't make it work less well by raising it up 2 inches. That'll put it at a 7-inch depth. Right now I've got it at an 8-inch depth, and it's worked just fine. Thank you, Kev. Kev is saying that he's heard the same thing, or that he agrees that you have to have the ClariSea lifted up quite a bit. So I talked with Devin from Reef Dudes, and he had said, yeah, it needs to be in about 2 inches of water. So that's why I came up with this plan. Alrighty. What more would you like to know? I am excited. I'm very excited about the Sump. I've had the same one for a long time. I made it. Oh, look at that. I got a thumbs down for asking what else do you want to know. It's amazing how quickly I can offend someone. I made my first Sump in 2010 for that tank, while that tank was still being built. And the Sump was done, and then the tank showed up, and I slid the Sump into place, and it's been there ever since. And when I set up that tank, it was in February of 2011, and 13 months later, the tank sprung a leak, and it had to be shipped back to Indiana, where they tried to repair it. And fast forward 18 months later, that's the new tank. And the new tank has been sitting over the old Sump ever since. And during the 18 months that tank was leaking, instead of trying a whole new Sump system, I actually used the Sump and the top-off system and all the pumps to feed to another tank that was jammed in that back corner where that doorway is. There was a 215-gallon reef tank jammed into that corner. And I moved all the livestock that survived into that, and the plumbing went to that existing Sump and top-off container, and it ran for 18 months that way. And then when it was time to hook up the new tank, I'd basically just cut the lines and move the pipes over to the new tank, and the rest is history. But it's been so long. I build nicer stuff now than I did back then. My seams are better than they were back then. So I said, I really want to make a new Sump. And what a catalyst that happened was, I was talking about it on this channel, said I'm thinking about making a new Sump. And then someone said, hey Mark, I need a new Sump, mine just sprung a leak. What would it cost? And I told him I can make it the deal of the century. Well, the deal of 2019. If you want, I'll let you buy my old one for 450 bucks. Or I can build you a new one for like 1,500 bucks. It's your choice. And he said 450 sounds great. So that's when the pressure started happening that I need to get this done, because I got to get a new one in there to give him the old one, and he needed it. I lent him a 100-gallon Rubbermaid trough just to get by for a while, but as eventually, his wife gets sick of looking at a trough, and so he says, Mark, where's my Sump? So I was able to get mine finished. All the plumbing parts that I've ordered are going to come in next week. So my hope is that by next weekend, I will have the new Sump installed, and I'll have the old one pulled out so he can pick it up. And that is where this is all going to be. Ryan asks the question, why did you use clear acrylic for your refugium? Great question. Thank you for asking that, because I wanted to mention that. So a lot of people often request, can you make this baffle out of black or out of red or out of gray or something, because I don't want algae to grow in the rest of my Sump because there's all this light coming down. Well, there's something that happens with light that I've seen. And I know when you look at a box of acrylic and you shine light in it, the light comes out everywhere. I get that. But what's really happening is the light is hitting the walls and bouncing back in. It's just not passing through like you're thinking it's going through. I know you see some light, but it's really acting like a mirror and ricocheting back in. So by putting the light here, it will ricochet back in, and this area will be fully lit. And as this fills in with plants anyway and comes all the way up to the surface, the plants become a ginormous shadow on this wall anyway. You might get some coralline on the back of the refugium. That's happened in mine. But what I like to do is put a piece of black foam right here that hangs up, that stands up maybe 6 or 8 inches or 10 inches tall. And that foam goes all the way across for the part, so when the lights are shining down, it does not shine through the air into the back of my skimmer. It doesn't shine through the air into the rest of my Sump. And so I've had this black shield on my Sump over there right now, which you can almost see behind that glowing white light. There's a black shield, so none of the equipment behind is getting any light, even though that clear baffle has been there all this time for 9 years. So it's okay to have clear. And also, when you put colored stuff or dark stuff, you can't see other areas. So I'm kind of like, I like to see everything. I know it might be boring or overly simplistic, but when I glue clear to clear, I can see the seam, I can make sure it's right, and I can see through every section to make sure that I'm happy with what's going on in my system, because this is the life support of the reef. Do you run GFO? No, I haven't run GFO in forever. The last time I tried it was 2004, and I tried it for 9 months and had no luck, and so I finally just said forget it. This sump is going to sit on a sheet of pink foam. The foam is actually underneath the old sump, so I'll probably just stick it on top of the same one, but I could always put a new fresh sheet after all these years. But I found in the past that when I revealed the old in the past, that the foam was exactly like the day I put it in. It didn't like get completely crushed down like you'd think, or wear out or anything. It's just a way to level out everything so that the underneath of this sump doesn't have any high spots and nothing can be a pressure point that could possibly cause problems down the road. TJ asks, how much would a sump like this go for? To be honest, I haven't done the math, but I would guess somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000. And that would be not including any kind of shipping. So the materials alone in this sump and the top of container was right around $700. And then there's all my time and everything else. Now my coffee is not hot. I can actually sip it. I was kind of thinking about maybe, because I still have some time, but it's a little bit late now, putting some kind of a divider in here, and then maybe have something else going on down here besides the macroalgae. Like, I don't know, sun corals, something I could easily feed and reach right here when I'm feeding the tank. I can go down there and just feed my sun corals, or goniopore or something. I don't know. But it really is just my refugium. Maybelline asks, why are refugiums good? The refugium is not a part of every sump. A lot of sumps are just a sump. A sump is the box of water that holds your, or the box that holds the water and holds all your equipment. The refugium is something that I learned about, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago. And it was a way to grow macroalgae that prevents nuisance algae in your tank. And it's a place for all the pods, the little bugs, to live and breed. And then as they, as they make their babies, you'll have like these little tiny, let's call them fleas, and they'll just be blowing around and buzzing around like bees. And then they pour right through here and get sucked into the pump and sent up to the display tank. And the display tank animals will eat those little bugs. So it's a great way to have natural food for your system if you are doing a good job with your parameters and keeping your bugs fed with things like phytoplankton and rotifer and phytofeast. Some of these things that we put in can really enhance that. Matter of fact, I talk a lot about Live Rock Enhance. It's another product by the same company called Reef Enhance, and that's a type of food. And when I was talking with Tulio at Reef Bright about it, he said, well, if you want a lot of pods, use Reef Enhance. And he said, because then you'll have tons of bugs. You watch. So I'm interested in doing that. Yeah, I agree. I hate cold coffee too, but that cup was really hot when I brought it over here, so I had to let it cool off. Reefer Madness says you could DIY it for $900. You could probably DIY it for $700, maybe even less than that. But it's all your time, and this is what I do for a living. I mean, I know it's like, oh, Mark made himself a new sump. That's really cool. He's going to talk about it on YouTube. But I build sumps every week, and to make one for myself is really exciting. And at the same time, I've put myself off many times to take care of customer orders that are pending, and I had to get this one done because I have a customer buying the old one, and so it had to be done. Yeah, the 6x12. Well, I've got this black foam. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Found this at Hobby Lobby. These are the same type of material you'll see kids playing with in the bathtub that's like different characters. They stick to the tile wall. So it's very thin. It's some kind of a foam. It's inert. It's the size of a placemat. And you can just hang it like this and block the light from here getting into the rest of your sump. And that's what I did. Just 2 or 3 of these things, which on mine, I just took a piece of acrylic, glued them on with a hot glue gun, sort of like an Oreo cookie around the top, and then I put fishing line straight up to support it and just hangs like this as a divider. And that was super simple, and it's 99 cents a sheet. It costs nothing. So, alrighty, let's see. I was trying to read that and it scrolled up. Where's my mouse? Garrett says, if my aquarium water is measuring around 1.024 and you're wanting to raise it up to like 1.026, you can actually add more salt water instead of top off water to get that salinity up where you need it to be. And I've actually been doing it with mine. The other thing I've been doing all week, and as you can tell in this container down here, point right to where, that's funny, I'm pointing over here, but it looks like I'm pointing right at that container. You see how low the water line is in there? That's intentional, because I got to pull that thing out, and I didn't want it to be, you know, filled up with 500 pounds of water. So I've been letting it top off my system until it gets almost bone dry. It's very close. I'm about 2-3 days away from empty. And then I'm just going to top off my system with salt water for a few days, because I need to get that box out, and I want to raise my salinity a little bit higher. Mark suggested a mantis shrimp for the sump. Yeah, that would be an interesting critter. Let's see. What do I expect to get from the new sump versus the old? Well, it's cleaner. The edges are rounded, so it's not sharp. And the seams are brand new. And it was slightly tweaked, like I was saying before, to where I can see what the water line is on the section over here. This thing is really heavy. This is my return zone right here, and so I can actually see the water line here from the front of the tank, which I can't do with the old sump. The old one, you just see plants. That's all you got in there. So my plants are going to stop here, and I'm going to see this water line. Also, my cooling fans are incorporated in the top where they're blowing straight down, and they're just out of my way, easy to remove and clean off and put back in place. My dosing pump has a spot. My Trident has a spot. All my plumbing is coming in from the end instead of from the top. And those were all the things I wanted. So that's the difference. Would you ever reuse sand? Nava asks. Yeah, I've done it many times, and it's very likely I might do it with this project going on here, because I got to take out that refugium. And I've got a bunch of sand in there, and I can just wash all the sand out with a garden hose, get it nice and clean, and I've got a video about that on my channel. And then I can go ahead and put in nice clean sand and start fresh. But I'm playing with the thought of using that calcium reactor media, because it's more like calcium-based bones that I could use. Where will I put my dose lines? Well, I don't dose specifically like you do, because I have a calcium reactor. It adds the alkalinity and the calcium straight into this return zone near the return pump. 24 hours a day. But I do dose NOPOX, and I also occasionally dose magnesium. So because of that, I run a tube into the return zone near the return pump. So as the chemical, the element is dripping in, it's getting sucked right into the pump and sent up to the display. Are you going to use the same macroalgae, or is there something else you could try? Well, I've tried different ones over the years, but I really can grow feather caulerpa like no one's business. It is the easiest one for me. It's been with me forever. I remember when I first bought caulerpa from the fish store back in like 2002, it kept dying. And it was a caulerpa called grape caulerpa. And that stuff, it would just go sexual, which means it would release all of its green, let's call it hemoglobin, even though I know it's not blood. It would leak it into the water would turn green, the plants would turn clear, and they would dissolve in 2 days, and I'd have no plants. I go back to the fish store and I had to buy it again and buy it again. It's like, I can't believe I'm buying this weed. It's ridiculous. Anyone else can grow this. Why can't I grow it? And that's when we were starting to realize that if you leave the lights on 24 hours a day, that species of caulerpa would not go sexual. It was the way to trick it. And so I grew tons of that caulerpa. But then the feather caulerpa, somewhere I got it, probably during a tank tour, I put it in my sump, and it kind of took over, and it never had a problem, and it doesn't need that 24 hours of light. I run the light in my refugium about, I guess, 9 hours a day. And with that situation, it's worked out perfectly with the caulerpa. It's just, the feather caulerpa does super nice, and it's pretty. It's easy to pull some out to share with others. And yeah, so I've tried Ketomorpha, it just seems to disappear. Jose asked, what thickness is this acrylic? The entire acrylic sump was made of 3/8 cast acrylic. And it's very important to use cast acrylic versus extruded, because cast is stronger. And this was all glued together with my normal solvent, but man, I really wanted to try out Weldon number 42. I mean, I really want to try it, which is a two-part. You mix 2 parts together, and then you got to put it inside this gizmo to suck out all the air, create a vacuum on the thing, and it sucks the bubbles right out. You'll see you stirred up your solution, and then you set it down, and you can see a billion bubbles in it. And since we want no bubbles in our seams, the last thing you want to do is inject glue full of bubbles. So you put it in this vacuum thing, and it just like, and then all you have is perfectly good gel. And then you can use that. But I've never actually physically used it, and it's probably a terrible time to practice on something that my entire reef depends on. So I'm going to have to save it for some other project someday, because I really would like to try it, because I heard it's super, super strong when it comes to bonds. And it's just something I've never done before, so I'm curious to see how it operates. But, I mean, the stuff I've been using now has worked great. I have people that have sumps that they've had them for 7 years, 9 years. I've got a guy buying my 9-year-old sump to put under his tank because the seams are that great. So, yeah, Shane, I might need help. Yes, that would be awesome. Maybe I can get you to come over. That would be super helpful, because pulling out the old one, it's going to be heavy. And then we got to slide in the new one, and I want to slide it in without scuffing up the bottom, because that matters. I hate when things get messed up, so I like to go in perfect and then start getting it dirty. Yes, the Trident has been great, and I'm happy to report. Let me double check, see what the latest stats are. Currently, my alkalinity is measuring 9.4, calcium is 485, and magnesium seems to be sticking at 1500. Now, what I did with the Trident is I allow Apex Fusion to keep track of the alkalinity, which, you know, it measures and it just tracks it. But then I'm using a line of code to say if the alkalinity gets higher than 9.3, slow down the calcium reactor to where it only runs 1/3 of the time. And then when it comes back down under 9.3, then the calcium reactor will just run up, you know, at its normal efficiency. And so I've had that code set up now, the current code, for a week, and it's working. I'm staying right at 9.3, 9.4 day in, day out, which is amazing. I'm really happy with that. And it's kind of cool to think that I've got my system dialed in with the Apex to stagger it on and off. And so far, so good. If everything's correct, you know, and everything works like it should, I'll then document it in a blog on the site. That way it's there for everyone. But I don't want to give out that information in case I'm wrong and someone tries to mimic it and it doesn't work. I'd feel bad, you know, because everyone wants things to just, they want to find out the answer, install it, and be done. And then when things start going to crap, they're like, well, that was in beta. We're still trying to figure out whether this would work properly or not. So I want to make sure it's right. So I haven't even really gone, you know, there's a Neptune group on Facebook, and in that group I've discussed it, but I haven't shared my code yet because I just want to make sure it's right before people start looking at it. Will you be placing all the sensors attached in your sump? Yeah. So let's see. I have a magnetic holder that can go anywhere, probably somewhere in here, maybe way over here, so it can't get any kind of disturbance from the water coming in. That holds them magnetically, hold the probes. I may move the salinity probe to a different spot, like possibly mount it right here inside the triple baffles. Another thing I want to do is I want to take a piece of acrylic. I mentioned a straw for down here. I want to glue a small piece of acrylic straw right here, because the Trident has a very, very fine line or tubing that it has to sit in a spot where there's no bubbles, and it sucks in the water into the Trident to then measure. And when it's measuring, it has to be pure water. It can't be water and air. So I've got this little plastic clip they gave us, but I can glue, again, like a little sleeve or a straw that will be the permanent holder for that tubing, and then the tubing will just come across here and sit right in the back of the Trident. So that'll be nice. Top off is magnetically attached too, so I don't need to make probe holders. I don't need to make this and that and the other. I can just pretty much do everything on the situation. You know, just use the things, just clip them in place. It's very convenient. It's sort of like you guys on your Frag racks. You love to just magnetically attach them to your tank and put them wherever you want them. Same principle with these holders. Robert's saying, I'm currently building a sump with a separate manifold, pump, and chamber. Separate manifold. Okay. That'll it'll empty into the return chamber. My thought is the water will all be filtered only once, and so you increase the efficiency. You know how the AC in your house pulls air through it, cools it off, and pushes it back out into the house? It kind of keeps doing it a lot to make that happen. And I believe that with our protein skimmers, that they are pulling out the dissolved organic compounds, the DOCs, and what we consider detritus and biologicals, like fish pee, fish poop, and it even pulls out phytoplankton, things like that. And so it's doing it, but it's not getting it all in the first pass. No matter what you do, even if you drained into the body of the skimmer, some of that water is going to come out before it ever was bubbled out. It's not like running it through 0.5 micron, so I think we should have slow flow through our sump, because you do want the filtration of enough time to work on the water. You don't want to just like send it through like the Niagara Falls. It's got to be slow and steady, and I've actually recommended 3 to 5 times turnover rate of your tank. So with my 400 gallon, I'm looking at around 2,000 gallons an hour through the sump, which is like 5 times. So that's kind of where I recommend that one. And I do like having the skimmer in the first section of your sump where the water first goes in, the dirty water, so it can really capture it. I hope that answered your question. I think that's Malik asked the question. Can you give us an update on your Nios skimmer? It's still going. It's back there. I can see it. I'm trying to point to the right spot. Right back there. And works great. I completely disassembled it a month ago. Because the slime that I'm growing from my Nopox dosing was actually in the skimmer, inside the bubble plate. It was really obstructing or obscuring or inhibiting the efficiency of the skimmer. So that has been completely cleaned apart and rebuilt, and it's working great, but the slime's coming back. So I've reduced the dose of my Nopox to 36 milliliters a day. Now here's something, I've had a couple people comment, and I've asked people before I even start dosing to get information about using Nopox. And I had a guy that last week or 2 weeks ago posted on the live stream saying, oh my God, why are you using so much Nopox? That's crazy. And he was using far less. But what I didn't understand was why he's using so little when the bottle says how much to use. And mathematically, on the bottle, I should be using 64 milliliters a day, and I'm only using 40. I'm using less than recommended. But he was acting like I was just dumping it in like confetti. So, obviously, I'm trying to find that sweet spot, because I would, I'm actually in, I believe we are now 10 weeks in of dosing. And I've gone through 4 bottles of Nopox trying to reduce nitrate. And last week when I checked, nitrates are still kind of somewhere around 20. If I'm reading my kit right. And the phosphates are staying nice and low, so I don't have to use phosphate or X. Nopox is just taking care of that. Yeah, it's like a pink slime. Some of it's a clear slime. I don't know if it's clear because of the lack of light, but it's all inside that overflow box back there, right there. That was filled with like this weird wispy stuff. It was down in the sump, on the power cords, on the heaters, on the side of the skimmer. It was just a mess. And so I grabbed a bucket and a sponge, and I just reached and scooped it out and rinsed the sponge and repeat for about an hour until I cleaned out a whole bunch out of my system. And then I felt better because it was really getting kind of disgusting. All right. So we still have like 30 minutes left, unless you want me to just end now. I'm happy to go into other details if you want. Well, I really can't. I can't work on this thing on the stream because I have to take it outside and route the corners off first. Too bad. It would have been fun to kind of glue that on while you're waiting. Well, you're waiting. Well, I'm waiting. What else? If you are wanting to learn how to work with acrylic, of course, you can go to YouTube and there'll be videos. I myself don't put a lot of videos about working with acrylic, specifically like the tricks of the trade because it's what I do for a living. And it just seems like if I put all that out on the web, you're going to stop buying things. So that's just my personal opinion. And that being that as it may be, or however that saying goes, be that as it may, I have all the articles on my website you can read with lots of pictures, lots of close-ups of the pin method, and all the tools that I used when I was building sumps before I got the CNC machine. And all of that information is still valid. And every bit of it is just as good for a DIYer out there that wants to make their own stuff and doesn't want to buy it from somebody. So you need to find a plastic supplier. You can Google that. Find out how much it's going to cost to get your acrylic. You'll need a table saw. You'll need a router. You'll need router bits. You'll need a fine blade for that table saw that has at least 80 teeth. Because if you don't have enough teeth, it's going to just like chip through the acrylic. You need what's called an ATB, or alternate tooth blade. And that's literally, if you look at the blade, there's a tooth this direction. I can't bend my finger the wrong direction. There's one like this and like that. And as they slice through, it gets a nice, beautiful cut. And then you still have to prep the edges, make sure they're nice and smooth. And then you got to clean them, and then you got to glue. And it's a step-by-step process where it takes, well, this took a couple of days to build. It wasn't like something you just knock out in an afternoon. And if it was a smaller one, yes, you can build a lot more of it. But I mean, typically, even what I call a normal size sump, which is like 40 by 16 by 16, that is going to take about 6 to 8 hours to build. So if you're thinking I want to build one, you've never built one before, it'll probably take you 3 times as long because you're learning. But it's not like you cannot do it. If you're meticulous, and if you're accurate, and if you really know a tape measure, you can do it. Will I do a live stream for the actual replacement of the sump? No, because I think that's going to take forever. We've got to disconnect the plumbing, got to drain the sump, empty out the refugium, remove all the gear, pull the sump out, wipe things down, install the new sump, install all new plumbing, and then install the gear back in and get it running, and then clean up my mess, and then clean up the old sump, which that's after I'm done, when that's okay. But no, I don't see that being a good live stream topic. I don't think, matter of fact, one of the reasons I don't think it'd be good is because it's really slow. And if you were just tuning in and you're just seeing me sitting over there in the corner with a brush putting glue on a PVC pipe, that's going to get boring really quick. And when I'm going to spend 10 hours on it, it's going to be boring. But if I can film it and edit it down into like a 15-minute video showing the entire process, that's fun to watch. So that's my plan, is to get footage. I'd love to have an extra person here at the time while I'm doing this to film from different angles. That would be awesome. So if someone like Shane wants to be in the local area and just wants to chase me around with the camera part of the time, that would be fantastic. So we have some good footage. I love having a cameraman. It's really nice because they actually, you're in the frame. You're not like your head's cut off, So that's nice. Oh, someone was mentioning my brain's on 3 different topics. If you want to build something yourself, like say you want to build a sump, I would recommend you build something smaller first to practice with. So for example, maybe you can make a top-off container. I mean, why not? You're going to learn how to use it. You can make it the exact size you need to hold water next to your aquarium that will then be used for replenishing water during evaporation. And it's a small body of water, and if you make a mistake or if something goes wrong, it's easy to replace or to patch, and you kind of see how it all worked before you tackle something bigger. And this is huge. This is a giant sump. A lot of people were really shocked at the size of it, but this is actually almost exactly the same size as my old sump. It's like a 1/4 of an inch different in all dimensions. That's it. Other than that, I just changed the inside of it some, and I added some nice features on the top. It's really funny because when I was gluing it together, it was very boring until I put the top piece on, and that's when it got interesting because I got to have my spot here for my Trident. I got my spot over there for the Kamoer that is perfect. I got my fans exactly where I want them. I mean, that was important to me. And but before that, it's just a rectangle with a couple of dividers. Somebody even said it looked like an entertainment center for one of the pictures I posted. Itchy asks the question, have you tried to remove nitrates without dumping in bottled products? Yeah, I've tried other things. I've tried a number of things. But it's not like I basically am using no-pox because I've never used it before and I wanted to see how it works. That way I have the knowledge, and if someone were to ask me, hey Mark, have you ever used no-pox? I can say yes, I have. And did it work? And I can hopefully say yes, it was great. And they say, are there any side effects? Yes, you're going to get the slime. But you see, at least I know some stuff instead of saying, I don't know. So I'm trying different things over time on my reef. But I never make huge changes. I never just rip things to shreds because my reef has to keep living no matter what. So that's why I tried something like I tried the brick, where you put bricks, ceramic bricks in your sump. I've done biopellets in the past. I've dosed vodka in the past. I've done water changes in the past. You know, there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. So I've got plans for, this is going to be finished. Then I'm going to replumb the saltwater vat that I have behind the reef. It's a 250-gallon poly tank, as big around as, well, way bigger than a water heater. It's ginormous. And I have to replace the pump. The pump got burned up. And so when I do that, I'm going to change the plumbing on it so I can easily do water changes into the frag tank as well as the reef. And when I do that, that will allow me to start being much better about water changes, because right now I can't really do any. It's before I could do them, but when the pump burned up, now I can't even do them. So the only solution is to fix the broken pump, and I'm just going to replace it. Joey says, where do you get your acrylic? I have a truck deliver it to my door. They come here almost every week. And there are multiple plastic suppliers in Dallas. There's Regal Plastic, Allied Plastics, there is Port Plastics, there is Professional Plastics. I mean, they're all out there. So just find one. And when you're shopping for acrylic, they're going to want to know how much you want. They may have a minimum order. So if you are hoping to, buy a tube of glue and $10 in acrylic, you may not have any luck. I know one place I was doing business with way back when I was first learning how to use acrylic. I bought some scrap acrylic from their scrap bin and some glue, and they said, you have to spend $25. And I was like, well, how much was the scrap? And he told me. I was like, I've already beat that. What are we talking about? And I ended up spending whatever I spent, 40, 50 bucks. And I just thought it was funny. I guess they just hate if somebody shows up to buy one item, like one can of glue. So there you go. Are you going to put new salt water in the sump and call it a water change? Well, I have some water left in that vat that I can't get the water out of. I mean, there's one way to get it out. Lower a big old mag pump in there with a huge long hose and just kind of pump it. And that may be what I'll be doing, because I'm not going to be able to save all the water coming out because it's going to be dirty. It's going to be mucky. So I'm going to be using some new water in the switchover. So there will be a minor water change. And then hopefully in the next week or two, I can go ahead and get that other situation taken care of so I can do some nice, easy water changes. That'll make me happy. It seems like I always have another project to do on the reef. There's always something. And it'd be nice when it's on autopilot, and it really was. When I first built it, I spent 7 months building that room to make it exactly the way I wanted it to be. And after 7 months, I set it all up, and it was so easy because everything was perfect and everything was new. Here we are, 9 years later, and things are falling apart, things are burning up, things are shorting out, and I have to just start replacing things with new things. You kind of have to go through the cycle of spending money again. It's just like a house. You buy a house, if you bought a brand new one, everything's great for the first few years, and then you just start replacing things that break. Rogue is asking, do you use Plex G or Polycast? This one was Polycast. Here, or Chemcast actually. This is the brand if you're interested. So it's very important to get GP. GP is what you want. That's cast. If it says FF, that is going to be extruded. Extruded is a little bit less clear. I mean, just a little, barely. And it's not as strong. Joey, thank you for the super chat. Yes, I do buy the acrylic here in Dallas. Like I said, they deliver it to my door. How do you control the flow into the refugium, or how does it flow into the refugium so it doesn't matter? I showed this before, maybe you just tuned in. I don't have all the parts yet. I'm still waiting for my plumbing parts to show up. But I'm going to have one of my 4 drains from my tank come into here, and I'm going to gate valve it down, and then it's going to go into an elbow and feed water right into the refugium, and it'll just be pure water. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. Let me switch the camera here. Because I've got the general principle installed in my old sump. So I think that is pointed the right way. Let me switch cameras now for you. So if you're looking at that video, you'll see that the water is moving and the plants are moving in the flow. And see that valve at the top that's white with a red knob? That is the same thing as the one I just showed you a minute ago that was gray with a red knob. And that one is water's draining down into the top of the refugium. On the new sump, it'll drill through the wall of the sump and go through the side. So that's the difference. But you can see it, just water's moving in quietly. There's no air bubbles. There's no salt creep, no salt spray. I love it. Pretty neat, right? Joey, if you need certain pieces of acrylic, like let's say you need some small pieces, yeah, let me know. Maybe I can cut out some pieces for you and save you some money. But there are different companies, like Regal Plastics and Allied Plastics do sell to regular people. You don't have to only, and there, like I said, there's Port Plastics, there's Professional Plastics. All of these people, I just call them up and say I need acrylic, and they're like, okay. And sometimes you have to go to them, and sometimes they deliver. Of course, I order so many sheets at a time. I have a big truck that pulls up in front, and then I have an easel in my workshop, and I have like 6, 8 sheets on the wall at all times because I burned through 3 sheets for this project. So, but no, they shouldn't. If one says they can't, then you ask another. But I would doubt that you cannot find any acrylic in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Jose asks, what do you think of the methanol method for removing nitrate? I'm fascinated by it. And I saw this really good video on the reefs.com YouTube channel. Someone shared it to me and I watched it. It was very, very interesting. I kept watching. I was like, how is that working? And there's a company in Florida that builds this box, and they build it out of PVC instead of acrylic. And they make a very small, narrow chamber to hold the methanol. And then the rest of it, water goes in, the methanol is dosed, that water, I guess, circulates within itself for 4 or 5 hours, and then that drains back into the sump, and then new water from the sump goes into it and does the whole process all over again. And eventually, let's just say this thing holds 5 gallons of water. You keep changing out 5 gallons of nitrate-laden water to nitrate-free water, and eventually, after X amount of time, whatever the period would be necessary to make that happen, you get to the point where your nitrates are low. It's pretty interesting. So I'm kind of tempted. It's another one that's like, but I still want to wrap this up with no pox and just, my bottom line goal is to say it worked great. That's what I want to say. And then I could say, let me try something different just because I want to try something different. But I'm not quite there yet, and maybe it just takes a little longer with my system. So we'll see. All right. I'm not dosing vodka. Oh yeah, 4 foot by 8 foot sheet you need to get from a supplier. Don't I'm not going to have them deliver it to me so that you can come all the way to my house from Sanger to pick it up. That's craziness. And also, when you're choosing your thickness of acrylics, you want to have the right thickness for the body of water it has to hold. So, for example, I posted some pictures on Facebook and Instagram, and people were like, well, how thin is that acrylic? It looks like 1/4 inch. And like, it was not. It's just, it's so big, it looks thin. It's a giant box. This is very, very strong. I have no doubts, no concerns, no swelling. And my top-off container is so tall that I have to make it out of 3/8 as well for strength, because otherwise, the taller the vessel, the more the walls will swell out, and you want to make sure everything stays contained. So by having nice, thick acrylic, those walls stay true. That's important. The only areas I flame polish are the inside edges, like the inner rim, the top of the baffles. I do that because I like to have them nice and smooth and shiny. But I don't ever flame polish like a glued seam because you can weaken it. Yeah. Are you going to have a deep sand bed in your refugium this time? No, I don't think so. I have in the past. I do right now. I have a 4-inch sand bed in there. And I'm going to go a different route this time in case it's part of why I'm dealing with nitrate. It's kind of a weird thing because many years ago, not everyone had a refugium. They had a sump, they had a skimmer, they had a tank, and they had nowhere for a refugium. And they came up with this crazy idea of taking a 5-gallon bucket and filling it up with sand and then pump water in, and I guess it would just be a bucket of water and sand, and then water goes out the other side. And the idea was that this could go through, the water flow through this bucket of all the sand, and it would remove nitrate. I never tried that. I always thought that was a little crazy. I just don't know what would happen. I mean, I'm sure it's fine, but it's just I don't have personal experience with it. You'd have to Google it to see what happened with the people that did it. But it was a nice way to figure out a way to create a nice big deep sand bed in an area that you could easily remove and clean if you needed to, especially if you wanted to have a tank that's bare bottom with no sand at all. But I never did that. I always liked a deep sand bed in my reef tank. My anemone cube has a 2-inch sand bed. My refugium has a 4-inch sand bed. But I might go with either a very shallow sand bed or maybe no sand at all, and instead I'll use this reborn media that is calcium reactor media, and I'm thinking about using that as the substrate. The guy from Ecotech has that as the substrate inside his display tank, and it looked kind of neat. I just feel like it's going to trap a lot of particulates, a lot of detritus in between it all, but everyone says it's really easy to clean out. I guess you can just shove it over and siphon out some waste and then shove it back. I don't know. So I'm playing with the thought maybe using that instead of sand, but I've always used sand. Is there any kind of sealant that can be used underwater so I don't have to drain my sump because I have a leaky baffle? I'm sure there's something, but there's nothing I know. There was a product many years ago. A fish store owner showed it to me. It was a caulk tube. It was blue. The inside, the stuff coming out was blue, and it was $80 a tube, and it was like an emergency patch. And the guy swore by it. He had like 12 of those tubes on the wall in his shop because they had a lot of clients. And if a tank leaked, they would go out to that tank and they would put that tube in the caulk gun and they just fill in that spot and no more leak. And then they could turn around and they could order a new tank, get it, because that takes a while, and then bring it in and then break down that tank and swap it. But the guy swore by it. He goes, this stuff's amazing. $80 a tube, but keeps the floor dry. And I was like, where do we get that? And I've had some leaky tanks. It would have been nice to actually known that source, but I never did find out. Unfortunately, when it comes to fixing a baffle in your sump, you're going to have to dry out the area completely, dry out that zone, that spot, and then you're going to go ahead and clean it really well with something. You could use vinegar and water. You could go a little bit beyond that and use denatured alcohol and wipe that. And then you're going to apply your glue, which in your situation would probably be something like this. This is Weld-On number 16, and it's just a gel type of glue, and you would just apply it inside your seam and let it cure for a few hours. I mean, really, I'd like it to wait 12 hours, maybe even 24, and then you can get that zone full of water again. If you go too soon, it might just come loose. I do want to warn you about number 16. Number 16 does a couple of things with acrylic. Number one, it can create crazing, which is a bunch of little tiny cracks. The second thing that can happen is that if you use too much, like you're like, oh, I'm going to use a whole bunch because I want to solve this, it's not caulk. And so what happens is as it shrinks, it sucks a bunch of air bubbles in, and it looks really horrendous. So you want to use a very fine bead, exactly what you need, and don't overdo it. Have you ever tried AZNO3? No, I have not. Have you ever thought of having frag racks on the back wall of the main aquarium? Some have them, but some don't like them, as it's a distraction from the reef coral display. I have a rule, no frag racks inside a display tank. I can't stand it, and I've seen it. And there's some really cool pictures on the web. I mean, seriously, you're like, oh my God, that tank is so cool. And then you realize what you're looking at, if you could back up another 3 feet, they have their display tank with all their corals, and then they have a frag rack in the front with all these beautiful, gorgeous things in the front. And by shooting through, it looks like their reef is filled with coral, and it's because you're seeing some in the foreground plus the bigger colonies behind it. It's very, it's a trick of the eye, and it's really neat. And I remember I saw the picture, like, man, the tank's awesome. And then I think later on there was some weird angled shot. I was like, oh, that's a frag rack on the front. You're cheating. And it was funny because then I couldn't unsee it. Then I knew. But no, I don't like frag racks in the tank. I know people do it, but see, the purpose of frags is to sell or trade, you know, or share with other people. And I know people want to have frags ready. I get that. But my reef tank is my reef. I want my reef to be a beautiful biological biotope. I don't want to see things that look completely man-made, like a rack made out of acrylic or egg crate or PVC or whatever with these little things on there. I don't want to see that. So I don't like that in a tank, so I personally won't do that. Whenever I get brand new frags, I hold them in my hand after I've dipped them, and I will go into my reef and I push them down into the sand bed, and they're just, the plug is in the sand. And I just stick in my 6 or 8 or 10 plugs into the sand. They'll be fine. And then over the next week or two, I make sure they stay okay. If they get knocked over, I stand them up again. And then I will plant them where they belong in the reef so that they're not on my sand bed anymore. John, you're asking about a roller mat. I have something for this sump that you missed in the earlier part of this broadcast. I have the ClariSea. So that is going to go right there. So I can try this out and see how it operates instead of running a filter sock. And Reefer Madness is reminding us, because we're running out of time, this stream is almost over. Today is Water Test Saturday. It's very important for you to test all the parameters of your tank. And I've mentioned this a couple times, so I'm going to say it again. Maybe it'll get ingrained into your skull. It's really important to test your water regularly like an employee versus being a hobbyist that'll do it if I wanna, because you have livestock, you have fish that can live 15, 20, 35 years, you have corals that cost you money that you want to grow into beautiful colonies. You need to test your water to make sure everything's okay. And even if the numbers are always the same, it's great to see consistency. If you can keep those numbers the same, fantastic. But if you don't test, you won't know when something's wrong. And the only way you'll discover something's wrong is if something's dying. And at that point, it's a race against time to solve the problem. So I always recommend every Saturday is Water Test Saturday. Measure your salinity, temperature, calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, phosphate, nitrate. Those are the big ones. There's a few others you can check. But I would really recommend that you measure all these things. I love it when you guys post the results. If you can post them over on Club Miller's Reef. Club Miller's Reef has some news. This week we finally hit 5,000 subscribers, or 5,000 members that are actually in. Oh, see, now I'm out of the frame. I'm gonna go over here. We've got 5,000 plus people in the group now, and we've still got the same moderators. We've still kept the peace. People are still being nice to each other, which I really love. Occasionally we'll see specific comments by members saying, I've left the other groups because I really like this one. Or they'd say things like, the stuff I've seen in that group, I've never seen in Mark's group. And that's intentional. We want to have a friendly group where you can feel safe and ask your questions and ask, what is this? And how do I solve this? And look at my new something. I mean, that's fine too. You know, we're excited to see your tank, your stand, your electrical, your equipment, your programming, your livestock, your macro shots, your iPhone pictures. You know, that's all part of this hobby. And we do want to see it. We want to know what's going on. Feel free to share your tank this month. Let's find out how it's doing. Let's do a thread about that. We can all post a picture of our tank, or we can all do a picture about our new sump. But yeah, feel free to join the group. It's free. And we only have one rule: treat others kindly. And if you can't do that, you get thrown out, and that's it. There's no second chances. So always treat people kindly. Really important. Leo says, random question was wondering whatever happened with the cold water tank project. You know, I'm always thinking about setting up another tank, and I watch other people do it. You know, I see Club Mealers Reef people, I see YouTubers, personal friends. They have multiple tanks. They have different sizes, different shapes, scattered all throughout their house. And oh man, it just sounds like more work. I don't know. Is it because I have a 400 gallon that I don't want to start another tank? I kind of like the idea of a cold water tank. I kind of like the idea of a little tiny nano on my desk where I have, you know, something adorable like sexy shrimp and walking dendros and a pipefish. I don't know. But then, you know, got to make sure that little tank has everything it needs and a power source, of course, that's battery backup and adequate lighting and then, you know, a cold water tank. If I were to do that, I got to get a chiller for it because you got to keep that around 55 degrees. I got to build it out of a 1-inch acrylic because it's got to not, if it's too thin, the walls sweat. And then I have to decide what do I want to put in it, because with cold water, there's some really cool stuff, but if you want an octopus, you can't put other things. If you want something else, you can't have an octopus. Strawberry anemones are pretty. They have these amazing snails that are just, they look like someone hand painted them with like ornate colorations, and that's their normal look. Crazy. And so yeah, I kind of like the idea, and when I see them from time to time, you know, that little itch gets in my brain, maybe you should do that. So who knows, that could happen at some point. All right. Let's see. I have a 60-gallon cube with a 40-gallon sump, 70 gallons total volume. I have 12 fish, a Vertex Omega 150 skimmer and refugium with Kamoer, and 2 gallons of marine spheres and 0 phosphate, 0 nitrates. Why? Well, you've got a really clean setup with a lot of good gear, and so that is why you're looking at a situation of where your nitrates and phosphates are so low. The spheres you've got in there are designed to remove nitrate, so they're probably doing a great job. Or your tank is young and it just hasn't built up enough garbage in it to start creating nitrate and phosphate. So whenever someone says their numbers are too low, I'm like, why don't you just feed more? I mean, that's just the simplest solution. Give them more food. And since I'm dosing no-pox, I'm at the point now where I just want to buy a ton of nori and start putting a sheet or 2 of nori on the tank every single day, just so the tanks can go nuts, because I don't have to worry about that. The only number I'm even worried about, which is dumb, but I'd like it lower, is nitrate. Rogue asks, how many gallons is your sump? This one to the top was, I think I said around 130 or 139. I'm going to be running it around 75 gallons of water. How do you feel about all-in-one tanks when starting the hobby versus a tank and a sump? You know, the all-in-one tanks are super convenient if you want something that you can just set up and not have to keep messing with. What happens is you start learning about new equipment and you're like, I want to try that, or I would like to use that, but it doesn't fit the all-in-one, because the all-in-one is designed for very specifically for each little thing that fits in the back. It was made for that tank. There are some mods where you can get something a little different from, like InTank is one of the companies that makes little tiny things out of acrylic, and it allows you to have like a stack of media, and you lower it in like a little a multi-tray thing that drops down inside the back. But then you're like, oh, my skimmer's no good, or my skimmer's too loud, and there's nothing else that fits. So that's the downside of an all-in-one. You may not like every single bit of gear, especially as you learn about other stuff that's on the market. But that being said, lots of people buy them, lots of people love them. I see lots of pretty little tanks. And you know, if you don't have great gear on the tank, that's okay. It just means you have to do more maintenance yourself. So if you can't have a good skimmer, then you're just going to have to do more water changes, and that way it'll be nice and happy and healthy. 2 minutes. Dickie asks, how long and at what temperature should I bake the baking soda to, well, you said to raise pH, to turn it into soda ash? You're going to put it in your oven at, it's on my website. I think it's 375. It's either 275 or 375. It might be 275. And you're going to do that for about 45 minutes. Let me find that for you really quick. So I believe I can copy and paste this right into the chat for you guys. And it says here 275. And I have mine set to 50 minutes. So, 45 minutes to an hour, and then allow it to cool. Anyway, that link will help you. And making your own soda ash is crazy efficient with your money because a box of baking soda is $1. You can make one box, I believe, is 2 cups of powder, and 2 cups of soda ash, which is baked baking soda, makes a gallon of alkalinity solution. So you can make it for $1. No. Light and darkness. Is it okay to use water from my dehumidifier to top up my sump? No. That water is not clean. Matter of fact, this is the tray that came out of my dehumidifier. And it is mostly full because it was running until I turned it off today. And if you look at the top, it's kind of disgusting. And no matter how much water you pour out of here, it will always be grosser and grosser on the bottom. I mean, there's times I've actually put bleach in here and let it soak for a little bit just to kind of get rid of this disgustingness. And even though it looks okay and it feels nice and cool as you're pouring it out, it actually comes out chilled. No, don't put this in your tank. This has got, not only did it take water out of the air, it's all the crap in your air that you're breathing is also in this water too. This water is not pure. This is just water sucked out of the environment that cannot go in your tank. Good question. Thanks for asking that. Alrighty. Kevin, I do have a calcium reactor. I was talking about that earlier. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. We had a nice group today. Let's see. Wow, 189 of us. That's nice. And I appreciate that you guys are tuning in every week. Next weekend again, there'll be another live stream. Maybe it'll be I don't know. I'll have to see how my week goes next week because I got to switch out that sump. But we'll see. Who knows? My hair might be on fire. I might be like in the middle of gluing and I just took a break to talk to you and I got to go back. I don't know. But I really would like to think that the new sump is installed and operating by the time of the stream, and then I can just kind of give you like an update on that. And we'll talk about a new topic. And matter of fact, this week, if you want to tell me some topics you'd like me to discuss, I'm happy to embrace them. I've been trying not to repeat previous live streams because I know people listen to them, especially if they they binge watch or binge listen to a bunch of them. And if I've already done an entire thing on cyanobacteria, I think doing a new live stream about cyanobacteria again is boring. And so I pretty much choose to answer questions on that really quickly rather than just do an entire dedicated talk to it. But at the same time, if you guys as a group feel that some of these things can be rehashed again and again, yeah, we can start opening up some previous topics from the past. Other than that, I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope your Reese continue to thrive, and I am excited to share what I can with this new situation here in the next couple of weeks. Bye, guys.